Here we are at the Micromobility Conference, Micromobility America in the Bay Area, and this is Oscar Morgan. You might recognize him from a piece of content we did in Amsterdam when the product was debuted. And I personally feel a little bit bad for how I kind of handled the content. I mean, like, we were really trying to put something together at the time, and we put Oscar kind of in front of the camera, and, you know, it just... This video was one of the most...
Conversationally, it got strong comments.
It was our most vibrant comment section in the history of ESG.
We had a lot of engagement.
That's it. Great engagement is the way that we'd say it.
I was on Reddit for a minute because it was just like, okay, we'll be honest, it turned into a bit of a shred fest. And so we're going to respond to some of the questions from the comment section of our YouTube video and give Oscar a chance to set things right.
Well, and the reason why I feel a little bit bad personally is because I spoke with Oscar at length in Amsterdam, and we've also spoken in between and today, and a lot of the comments were around feeling like this was, you know, a marketing sell or something like that. And I think that's part of why I wish I had kind of gotten in front of the camera to kind of make this more of a conversation.
What we definitely learned through the process is I'm not very good on camera. Well, I'm much happier as an engineer than I am as a
I think part of the problem is that you're maybe too good on camera, and you sound you sound very smooth. So we're gonna be a little maybe a little less smooth today.
All right. So basically, I'm seeing this as an ask me anything.
Yeah.
So the idea here has to be, you can ask me anything.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see kind of like this more organic start. We're just trying to sit down and kind of talk about these things.
Yeah.
You know, Oscar,
I think we made the same mistake as last time, which is that it's the end of the day. Everyone's feeling a bit tired.
Yeah.
I'm phenomenally sunburned.
Yes. But, so one word, I mean, it's kind of a common word, but also an uncommon word, is I'd say, like, when I think of Oscar, I think of the word kind. I mean, it's just something really shocked me at the conference with how he interacts with all the different people in the industry and how he affirms the different products and the different founders and what they're doing. And it's genuine. And I've seen it with time.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, Oscar is not a salesman. He's an engineer. And that was so clear. And so we wanted to just kind of take these, you know, criticisms, and you know, Oscar even jumped into the comments thread and started responding to things, you know, and he doesn't have a big, you know, pride on his back to be able to, you know, he's not
It's
fragile.
cool that you say that, literally as the wheel bike and a tour ride past. It's like, as two of the coolest bits of tech that are currently out and about, are sort of scooting and riding around us. If you like the engineering, it's really difficult not to love what's going on here. So anyway, appreciate the comment. That's kind of you.
Let's dive into some of the comments. And the first one is maybe the most obvious, but it just kind of addresses price. And somebody says, you know, way too expensive. Otherwise, it still looks fine. I think the Segway Max is still the best scooter.
Segway Max is a great scooter.
It is, yeah.
I mean,
but this is not trying to be a Segway Max.
Well, today, if someone comes to me and says, I want to commute on a scooter, and I want it to be reliable, and I don't want anything too complex, nothing high performance, then I immediately say G30 Max. Like, it's a great, we are not targeting, we're not going head to head with the G30 Max. What we found was that if we want to build a product which we're super confident is going to be reliable, and which we really think someone can commute on reliably for what we would consider a reasonable mileage, like a reasonable number of kilometers, we can't do it at the sort of price that Segway can achieve. So fair play to them. They've got a good product out at a good price point. I would say that we're bringing stuff in that the G30 Max doesn't do. I've not yet had anyone back to back with a G30 Max and say, you know, actually I'd rather have that one. So in terms of the stability of the ride, in terms of the comfort in the ride, in terms of the day-to-day living with it, I think we deliver stuff over and above. But my goodness, if you've got $800 to spend, I think a G30 Max is, then great scooter, recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard a presentation from Horace today about how truly massive this market is, with a potential 5 billion riders and just all of these data points with respect to where the world's headed and what is needed from a climate perspective. And I think the important thing to realize is it isn't a bunch of people competing for a tiny market. It's a market that is growing like crazy. And what Bo has done that's really interesting, actually, in Amsterdam when they debuted the scooter, he had a phrase, socially illegal, that he put very prominently on stage. And he opened the speech with like,
Socially
okay,
illegal.
who owns a scooter? And a lot of people actually didn't have one.
Not a lot of people, like the whole audience. I had like 5 or 6 hands go up in a micromobility conference. I mean, people don't own these things. They use the rentals. Now, I'm not saying there's a die-hard core, and currently it's kind of 2 groups that I see. There's the guys who are just charging in at like $300 to $800. So that's like your base spec Xiaomi up to a G30 or something of that, or like a low-end Inakim, I guess. And then you have what we see as performance. And these are these amazing, like a Dualtron or a decent Apollo, things which are meant to go 45K, maybe more, and which are like $1,500 up. And those are these 2 very, very clear camps at the moment. But what we're not seeing is really high levels of, in the same way that you get with premium e-bikes, just mainstream consumers who are treating it like, I would normally drive, but it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm gonna take the e-scooter. I'm speaking in generalizations here, right? So that's normally when you come unstuck. But this is where we're targeting. This is who we're doing it for.
What's really interesting that we've seen with Bo is kind of like the hype from the automotive sector of just people in automotive, and actually at some times they were saying this is the scooter for people who have a car. A lot of people have been getting really excited about it, and people who would not be excited for a scooter. And that's the thing that's so interesting to us, because it really does grow the opportunity for everyone. One concept is from Horace Didio is jobs to be done. Well, there's ultimately there's ultimately these reasons why someone purchases something. Sometimes they're more abstract, like you're purchasing safety, you're purchasing connection with someone, and sometimes it's performance, and sometimes it's more utilitarian. But as the industry matures, we're going to see this fleshing out of everything that anyone could ever want a vehicle for, and that's what Horace's presentation was about, because micromobility is what he says, fruit flies to elephants, and the amount of iterative ability to create all of these different vehicles, 2, 3, 4 wheels, covered, not, and every single type variation is going to happen. And that's what immediately interested me about the Bo, because what you cannot deny is that this is unlike every scooter that's ever come out.
Sure, and it's one of the things that I find, often people will look at our spec sheet and go, well, why haven't you made it like an Apollo? Why haven't you made it like a Dualtron, same price? It's like, those exist. So we've never really seen the value in creating the exact same proposition that they do. Now, suspension, one of the things that we've taken a lot of heat for is it's a 2,000 price point scooter that doesn't have suspension. It's like that delivers on a particular promise. If you're riding off-road, or if you're on cobbles, or that sort of scenario. If you're on tarmac, actually, when you dynamically stabilize the steering, which is what we've focused on in our engineering, you deliver a slightly different quality, which actually those scooters don't have, which is this very relaxed ride. And I mean, I've been riding the new Apollo's great, but the one way in which I think that Bo is generally very impressive for people, and the way in which we tend to win out is around that just total relaxation. We're almost trying to take steps that mean the scooter melts away. So you're not thinking about the road surface. You're not thinking about whether you're going to be put off by a bump or by a dip. It's kind of the focus of what we apply our attention to. To what you were saying around Horace and Horace's talk, I agree with him. What are the steps by which this market goes from being quite early adopter and like the die-hard core who, I mean, it's just awesome when you see people on scooters now. They're right at the edge of this market. They're really early in. But I think he's right. I think it goes to a place where it becomes very mainstream, very normalized for people to commute on a scooter, to use one most days. I think that's a great world, because it really will mean people moving out of cars. It's funny, we always think of it, we come from the UK, so you got wet weather the whole time, and people say, well, do people ride in the rain? Standing here like massively sunburned, I'm going, well, the sun is also a problem. Like, you got it both ways. Doesn't change the fact that it's a great way to get around town. Doesn't change the fact that people will put up with that to enjoy their ride, to beat the traffic. So anyhow, like I believe great abundance in the sector, but I also believe that there's very little value in an abundant sector in just creating more of the same thing. Like we're trying to do something subtly different here. The automotive, it's more about the method of manufacture. So the fact that we're working from a monocoque construction, this is how you create a car, and it has advantages to it, it has benefits to it. So
with that price tag, I think maybe something that the audience didn't quite get as much is they heard about some really cool features like safe steer, air deck, and all that, the halo. For you, what are like the really expensive things that kind of construct that higher price tag?
Good question.
What are the hard things to produce from an engineering perspective, or just anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few really basic building blocks in that. You want 50 kilometers range, which I think 50K, so 30 miles, is kind of where you have to be if someone's going to be using it every day. There's a certain cost to that battery. Now, you can crush that battery cost, but what you lose is traceability in the cells, you use quality in the BMS, you lose the monitoring on each cell from the thermocouples. And so from our point of view, if you strip costs out of the battery or you lose the range, big no-no. So that's just we can't get away from that. High quality cell with high quality BMS, that has a significant cost base. GPS and IoT connectivity tracking, surprisingly big cost item. You can't really escape that. And a very high quality mode controller tends to be, it's super important from both the reliability and if you want to crank the power. But again, that's a big element. And then inevitably, we're bringing through stuff that hasn't been done before. So things like air deck, this is unique to us. Things like the safe steer, yes, this is completely, you can't buy this off the shelf. No one's done it before, so it's like we had to invent it, and then we had to invent the creation.
And then the monocoque frame, that's a unique feature, and that can't be easy to do.
Yeah, so, I mean, the whole monocurve thing is based on manufacturing methods which are pretty common to automotive. Like we didn't have to invent extrusion, we didn't have to invent forging and casting and so forth. So that stuff, it's definitely not what you would call a low-cost frame, but I would say for the way it performs and for what it allows us to do, I think it's actually one of the most cost-effective ways or elements of what we're doing.
And you were telling me earlier, one of the, like, it's hard to wrap your head around, like, okay, well, what's the advantage of that? It looks neat, okay, that's one thing. But there is actually a real advantage we were talking about with the steering bearings is on a scooter, when you put the bearings that are controlling basically everything with the scooter really close together, there's a lot of leverage on that. You've got this big lever just working those bearings, and that's why, the steering stem wobble has always been such a big discussion for us. And here,
you mean across all scooters?
Yeah,
it's
across
like,
all scooters.
What?
Yeah, it's one of the things we judge on scooters.
Sure, right?
But here is the first time we've ever seen where those two bearings, the lower bearing and the upper bearing, if this were a bicycle, those would be the two bearings that are kind of here above your forks, below your handlebars. Yeah. They're like a meter apart.
Yeah.
And so,
well, like 750 mil, 800 mil. But yeah, they're well separated,
so there's
right?
bearing way down here to bearing way up here, and
like
so
an order of magnitude more than on any other, which is.
And so it just eliminates that stem wobble. Aside from the fact that it's a solid, that it's a solid non-folding scooter, which brings me to my next question.
Well, just to touch on what you were just saying, because this is really important, right? When in general in engineering, we try and take the approach of don't fight physics. So you can, inevitably you can, and to a certain extent, safe steer does that. So one of the nice things with safe steer is it allows us to set like the deck height, it allows us to make certain concessions to handlebar width and the geometry. We have a slightly more upright steerer than we would otherwise have. Safe steer allows us to balance for that and still get that lovely cruisy feeling. But wherever we can, work with physics rather than against it. So for example, as you say, when you go from two bearings like 100 mil apart and a great big lever applying pressure on them, I mean, yes, you can tolerance that to a 15th of a millimeter, but this is really awkward, difficult. As soon as you get grit in there, you have a problem. Your tolerance in manufacture is horrible. Your cost of manufacture goes up. And we've seen, I mean, there are definitely products out there that have had real issues with the neck braking and some of that stuff, which I find very scary because for us, they're like, the basic minimum is try it in every way, at every opportunity to create a product that will never hurt someone and that someone even trying to hurt themselves will struggle on. So from our point of view, basic stuff like move those bearings apart. So suddenly you've got, the physics is on your side, but even the fundamental of the monocurve you're moving, you go from like a tubular construction, which has this thick wall, thin tube, to a monocoque where you're moving all of the force to a stressed skin, which is like all the forces go right through the outer of it. And just from the really like fundamental of the engineering, this is a very strong strategy. It means that the thing becomes extremely robust. That's not to say that it doesn't then become like issues when you're trying to figure out your weld pattern and the exact wall thicknesses and what you do in terms of some of the radiusing and the stress concentrations. That doesn't go away, but it certainly, the core strategy is quite effective. So that's yeah, a big part of what we're doing here. The quote I've heard is that everything else is a recommendation, but physics is the law. and too often you see companies trying to defy that in their engineering. It's like software can't save you. You have to get it right.
All right, so this one addresses the subject of folding. So they ask, how are you supposed to lift it up or store it? Just another piece of modern art, debatably beautiful, but non-functional.
Hey, that's the great thing about, we're very careful to avoid talking about beautiful design. I love how Bo looks, Bohem. It's certainly unique, right? So you can't argue that. And I love subjectivity because for one person it's great, for another person not their cup of tea. Your question was around folding.
And lifting and carrying.
Okay, so we've got an 18-kilo scooter. There are limitations. I would not have people running up 3 flights of stairs with that. We're working, so the very initial units that we're shipping like end of October, that we're calling the Alpha Gang, the very first ones out, they don't have anything that particularly solves that for people. And it's probably, I would say, it's the element of our user experience that right now we have the most work to do on. Why doesn't it fold? In much the same way as the steerer shaft, like moving those bearings apart and eliminating slop from your steerer. The hinge is a weak point. In fact, I love, if you go to, say, Madrid right now, which is like very high scooter culture, you see loads and loads of scooters where people have like sellotaped up the hinge, or they've clamped. They actually sell clips specifically to shut your hinge. We asked loads of people, and they all were saying we leave it in our front room. I leave it unfolded. So when you're starting a company, what really matters is that you ship, is that you get product to people. And as a result, everything is a trade-off, like every choice is a trade-off. Now, we knew that we couldn't trade on ride comfort and stability. That was like everything we were going to focus on. So ride comfort and stability really mattered. And what we found was there was a serious user base for whom the folding capability was not essential. And so it's like, okay, if you don't require the fold, but you really do care about your ride comfort and feeling great on the scooter, this is the product for you. For those who want the fold, the great news is there are hundreds of scooters out there which fold in all sorts of clever ways. And as from our point of view, it's like we do something when we know we can deliver on it really great.
And the interesting thing is we sort of treat it like we've never seen a scooter that doesn't fold. But in fact, every rental scooter in the world doesn't fold, and partly for the same reason. Even though I spent some time at Lime,
yes,
and you know, there are some advantages for portability and for packing these things around to bring them back to the warehouse if they did fold.
Yeah.
But they didn't fold because it's a failure point, and it just was better that they didn't.
I mean, I love. If you go right back, do you remember there were companies using an ES4, like
yes.
and they actually fixed out the ES4. Yeah,
I've run the ES4s for a different scooter company.
So there you had people fixing out the hinge to take it away as a failure point, right?
Ours were non-folding ES4s.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we are very aware. It's like, what's the fundamental point of what we're trying to do? Well, we want to see carless cities. We think the way that you create carless cities is you give people a better alternative to a car. It can't be the same. It's like it has to be better. The scooter has certain, to use Horace's term, it has certain asymmetric advantages. You can cross town faster, you will enjoy your ride more. Like the freedom that you see in car adverts, you actually get that on a scooter. So like, it has its advantages, right? Yeah, totally. They're on a beautiful empty road. I mean, we just came in from East California, and it's like, okay, these are the roads I see in the adverts, but I've never seen those roads in Europe. So anyway. So where I was going was we are completely aware that there are people who need to keep it in a flat or in their home. They need to jump on and off a train or a bus. All of those different use cases which demand a really compact package. So I assure you this is stuff we thought about. Like, this is stuff that we want to solve, because when we solve it, we're going to help more people to have that opportunity. The great news is there are lots of people who are already creating compelling products. I love the way the Tour does it folds and it stands on its handlebars with the two little cowl horns. This is super cool. Hey, the Segway L9, was it? The one where you pulled a single lever, the handlebars folded round.
It's a T15 Air.
What's the
Well,
yeah,
here-
T15,
yeah.
T15. No, you're dead right. Sorry, I got end of the day, right?
I love that. That's the one thing I love about that
End of
scooter.
the day
You
and
pull it and it goes
sunstroke. Yeah, it's so clever. The way it pops down, it folds really
until the
beautifully.
cable fails, and it does. Well, on ours it failed. The cable stretched and it would not fold or unfold anymore. It's a nightmare to readjust that thing.
Hey, cable slack. When you do anything folded, you don't underestimate. Like cable slack is almost like the final boss. You think you've figured it out. You got a hinge that's going to solve, and that's all reliable. Then cable slack is just waiting like a little goblin at the end to finish you off. Like, yeah.
All right, so we've got another question from the comment section from YouTube, and this is a reaction to something you had said before, where they say more speed and more power doesn't equal a more enjoyable ride. Going up a hill at 6 miles an hour isn't enjoyable either.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay,
how
so
is the hill
there's
climbing?
two things to unpackage there. The first is I advise everyone to get media training and not to do interviews at the end of the day. The second is like we don't make slow scooters. We are not going to ship a slow scooter. There is a really strong existing body of products, which is like the Dualtron, the Kaboo. These are, I mean, the Ryon, if you want to take it to an extreme. And trust me, as an individual, man, do I want a Ryon. I mean, scooters aren't legal in the UK yet for personal ownership, but my daily ride is a boosted rev. When I'm not doing testing, we have a pair of boosteds, and it's just such a cool scooter. Like, love it to bits. Power is fun. What we don't necessarily agree with is that the average rider, consumer, needs 3,500 watts of power, right? That any San Francisco hill can be dealt with for rides up to like 100, 120 kilo, somewhere around 1,200 watts, maybe 1,500. Now it gets a bit nuanced because a lot of companies quote the electrical watts rather than the mechanical watts. So there's a difference between what the controller can feed through and what actually gets converted into your mechanical watts at the wheel. So for us, it's like, be honest. You give your peak, your mechanical watts, like what the user actually can deploy. And also torque is really important. So your ampage matters. And when we were talking earlier about the BOM cost, like what's the cost of making the scooter, we have to have a controller that can handle serious amps because that's what gives you that lovely torque. So when you're talking about 6 miles per hour up a hill, which is definitely rubbish, you don't want that. You have to be able to throw amps at the problem is the punchline. So basically I agree. Whoever's worrying about that, like, we do not ship slow scooters and we will not ship slow scooters, and we've had a lot of fun. Like, in a previous life, my role was creating the most dramatic vehicle of a type. When I was working with Williams, we were creating showstoppers, so things which would go and break records, which would go and like beat the Nürburgring, would go and just demonstrate how fast a car can go, and it was incredibly good fun. So we are going to play with that stuff at Bow, but for the mainstream consumer, the power that you need, the torque that you need, not just excess, which would have knock-on effects all across the rest of the product.
I think one takeaway I get out of
You need
this
more media training.
is smoothness and stability, and the really high emphasis of that, because that's so clear in all micromobility, all the
God, yeah.
trade-offs that you're making, and there's a lot going for those.
100%. For me, it's like the range you need, the power you need, and a ride that's so stable you never have to think about it. Perfect. This is a product that I really want to be on. So at the end of the day, I guess that's where this all started. Like 3 years ago, we were saying, what's the scooter I want? That's literally where we began. And Bow AM is the first manifestation of that. There's more to come, but that's where we're starting.
And it sounds to me like one of the, it's not just this necessarily the scooter that you want or the Chaser. It's certainly not what I would, it's something that would be suited to me, but something that like it's accessible. I mean, it's like one of the themes I think is an accessible scooter that your mom could ride.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we're not trying to convince people. So if it's not the right scooter, the great news is there's a whole world of beautiful scooter products out there that will be right. But for the person who cares about the same attributes that we care about, it's a great product. And luckily there seem to be lots of people who agree with that, so that's really good news. And yeah, different stripes for different types, right? We just want to create something that really, really delights the people who it's intended for, and that's what we maximize our effort on.
Thank you so much for taking this conversation. It's really good to kind of dig deep and nerd out about these things. And I also want to say thank you to our audience. I think with that first video, we had a lot of very experienced, industry enthusiasts that kind of jumped on the video immediately within one day. So it spiked, and then with the comments and like some of the dislikes, the algorithm kind of decided that this wasn't mass market. And so I think
we got dislikes as well.
Yeah, a lot of with Bo is, it's for a.
It's still engagement.
It's well, it's
as if they say all press
it's
is good
for a
press.
more mass market audience, and YouTube with the way that they make their decisions with the algorithms, they kind of decided not to show it to more audiences, and for Bo is for the mass market audience, and so I hope that what we can do together is to help kind of match, because this is our job, is to give everything the credit that it deserves and help match that with the audience it's for.
Yeah.
So
also, what I like with an Ask Me Anything is we really don't have stuff to hide. Like I might get I might not be good at speaking on camera, but genuinely we come from a place of engineering, and I love an Ask Me Anything because it's more fun, right? I mean, ideally we would have everyone in a room and they could just flay direct, and we would respond as best we could. In that case, I might bring along like other guys I work with so that they could feel some of the heat as well, but it's cool.
well, yeah, stay tuned. We can't wait to do more content on Bo, and best of luck to them and with everything you're doing. You have a really exceptional team. I mean,
Thank you,
everything
guys.
we've seen from design and brands, really well done.
Have you had a chance to ride it today?
Yeah?
Yeah?
I haven't.
You haven't?
Yeah.
Paul, we've got to get you on it, man. We've got to get you riding.
All right.
Sweet.